Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to another episode of Devine Interventions. I'm your host, and today, we're diving deep into a verse that encapsulates the essence of our faith, Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Today, we unfold a heartrending yet inspiring tale of a grieving widow who transformed her loss into a beacon of hope, love, and faith. So sit back, listen carefully, and prepare to be moved as we journey together through this touching story. As dawn swept over the little town of Meadowgrove, a quiet peace usually settled within the heart of Lydia Hammond. With her husband Daniel by her side, their children sleeping upstairs, the world outside seemed simple, predictable, safe. But this morning was different. The sunrise painted the sky with shades of orange and purple, yet its beauty was a stark contrast to the storm brewing within Lydia. The previous night, officers had stood at her door, their uniforms crisply ironed, their faces grim. The image was still burned into her mind, their voices echoing with the dreaded news. Daniel was gone, lost to a sudden, cruel accident. Now, Lydia found herself standing in the once comforting familiarity of their shared bedroom. The scent of Daniel's cologne still lingered, a sweet yet painful reminder of his absence. The silence was deafening. She missed the comforting rumble of his voice, his laughter, the whispers of "I love you" before drifting into sleep. Lydia slowly walked to Daniel's side of the bed, her fingers tracing the cool, untouched pillow. His book lay there, a bookmark peeking out. She picked it up, her heart heavy as she noticed the bookmark, a vibrant ribbon with the verse Romans 8:28 scribbled on it. She cradled the book close to her chest, her mind grappling with the crushing weight of grief. Alone, she thought, she was so terribly alone. Her children, young and vibrant, were a testament to Daniel's spirit, but they were still so innocent, their world not yet acquainted with loss. It was a burden Lydia wished they didn't have to bear. Feeling the tears welling in her eyes, Lydia went to the window. The world outside was stirring, life continuing despite her world falling apart. The chirping of birds filled the air, the melody bitter to her ears, while the fresh morning breeze carried the promise of a new day, a promise that now felt hollow. As she looked at the mirror, she saw a woman weathered by sorrow. Yet, in the midst of despair, Lydia felt a strange resolve. She clutched Daniel's bookmark tighter. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. It read. In that moment, Lydia felt a sliver of strength weaving through her grief, a warmth that momentarily held her cold sorrow at bay. There was something about those words, they seemed to echo in the hollow chambers of her broken heart. She didn't quite understand it, nor could she foresee how much those words would soon mean. As the sun continued its ascent, painting the room with gold, Lydia whispered a prayer for strength. She was not alone, she reminded herself. She had her faith, her children, and now, these words to guide her through the storm. Her journey through grief was just beginning. But in her heart, she made a promise, to herself, to Daniel, and to God. She would not let this storm break her. In the quiet town of Meadowgrove, days began to bleed into nights, time taking on an ethereal quality, as Lydia waded through the tides of her grief. The practicalities of life once shared responsibilities between her and Daniel became monumental tasks, pulling her further into unfamiliar territory. Every morning brought a fresh wave of Daniel's absence, a stark reminder of the unfillable void in Lydia's heart. The aroma of his brewing coffee no longer greeted her. The familiar sound of his humming, a gentle symphony that once flowed through the house with the rising sun, was replaced by silence. His laughter, a rich and comforting resonance, was now a memory echoing within the walls. Every room in the house, every object, was imprinted with traces of Daniel. The worn-out recliner by the fireplace where had read bedtime stories to their children, the little notes had leave for Lydia on the fridge, silent testimonials of a life and love abruptly halted. The world outside their home moved forward, but for Lydia, it felt as if time had stalled. Each morning, she prepared breakfast for her children, their wide eyes a mirror reflecting the ache she felt. Their innocence stung her heart, a cruel reminder of the carefree joy that once was. How was she to navigate this lonely path without Daniel? How was she to raise their children, to ensure their happiness, alone? In the evenings, After her children had been lulled to sleep with stories of their father's bravery and kindness, Lydia found solitude in the pages of Daniel's book. The verse from Romans, scribbled on the bookmark, was her tether in the storm of loss. It was a spark of hope in the dark, an anchor in her turbulent sea of grief. Yet the solitude also gave birth to reflection, and with it, questions of faith. Why would a loving God take away Daniel? Why was this part of his plan? It felt like an invisible chasm was growing between her and God, fueled by her grief, her loneliness, and her bewilderment. And at the core of her struggle lay an unsettling question. How was she to reconcile her love for God with the pain he had allowed in her life? In those quiet, reflective nights, the words of Romans 8:28 would glow in the dim light, promising solace yet seeming so far from reach. As Lydia traced the words, she found herself yearning for understanding, for the ability to see God's plan as she grappled with her loss. As the second week since Daniel's passing drew to a close, Lydia found herself at a crossroads. She was not just a grieving widow. She was a mother, a woman of faith, who was yearning for healing. As she ventured into this unknown territory, Lydia clung to the lifeline offered by those divine words, praying for the strength to not just survive, but to navigate the storm with faith and courage. The once warm and inviting Meadowgrove Church stood majestically at the end of a cobblestone path, its stained glass windows throwing a kaleidoscope of colors on the pews within. Lydia had walked this path countless times with Daniel, their hands entwined, their hearts united in faith. But now, the path felt long and cold, each step a reminder of her solitude. Her fingers traced the familiar oak pews, the hushed whispers of the faithful, and the scent of old hymn books bringing a rush of memories. She missed Daniel's comforting presence beside her, his voice humming along with the hymns, their shared prayers. Seated in their usual spot, Lydia tried to focus on Pastor John's sermon, his words usually a balm to her soul. But today, his voice seemed distant, the biblical verses echoing hollowly in the vast expanse of her grief. A pang of guilt washed over her as she grappled with the turmoil brewing within her. It felt as if her faith, once as steady as the northern star, was faltering. The words of Romans 8:28 played on a loop in her mind, but their meaning seemed obscured by her sorrow. Why had God allowed such pain in her life? How could the same God who promised his children a hope and a future also permit such despair? As she wrestled with these questions, Lydia felt the silent tears escape, trailing a hot path down her cheeks. The silence of the church, broken only by the rhythmic tick-tock of the old clock and the distant murmur of the pastor's voice, seemed to amplify her loneliness. After the service, she sought solace in the quiet sanctuary of the church garden. The scent of blooming lilacs filled the air, the soft rustle of leaves whispering tales of seasons past. Here, she had spent countless afternoons with Daniel, their laughter and dreams mingling with the floral breeze. Sitting on the familiar wooden bench, she allowed the tears to fall freely. She missed Daniel, but more than that, she missed the sense of peace and purpose that her faith had always provided. The verse from Romans seemed to mock her now. God works for the good of those who love him. But where was the good in her pain, in her children's loss? In her heart, she knew her relationship with God wasn't meant to be void of questions. Yet, it felt as if the rug had been pulled from under her, leaving her faith unsteady, her heart heavy with questions she didn't know how to answer. As she sat there, the golden sunset painting the sky with hues of red and orange, Lydia found herself at the precipice of a journey she had never anticipated. She yearned to rebuild her relationship with God, to reconcile her grief with her faith. And as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, Lydia promised herself she would find a way, clutching onto the hope that the words from Romans would one day provide the solace she so desperately sought. As autumn blanketed Meadowgrove in hues of orange and crimson, the days took on a rhythm of their own. Lydia grappled with the duality of her life, caught between the mundane duties of raising her children and the profound journey of rediscovering her faith. The children, Emily and Sam, took solace in their mother's strength. Emily, with her soft curls and wide brown eyes, mirrored Lydia's tenderness. Young Sam, brimming with energy and curiosity, bore an uncanny resemblance to Daniel. Their laughter echoed in the house, a bittersweet melody to Lydia's ears, the chorus of life pushing forward in the wake of loss. Each night, Lydia held them close, their bedtime stories imbued with tales of their father's kindness and love. It was in these intimate moments that she found a semblance of peace, their innocent love a beacon of hope in her darkest hours. Yet with every whispered "I love you, Mama," and every innocent question about Daniel's whereabouts, Lydia felt a tug at her heart, a renewed urgency to find her faith, for herself and for them. She had made a promise to them, that their lives would be filled with love, that their father's memory would be kept alive, and most importantly, that their faith would not waver. It was a promise she intended to keep. With her children as her motivation, Lydia sought answers to her questions. She dove into her Bible, revisiting stories she thought she knew by heart. She sought counsel from Pastor John, his wisdom a comforting presence in her search for understanding. Slowly, she began to perceive the subtle nuances of faith and loss, the intricate dance of sorrow and acceptance. Yet it was Daniel's bookmarked verse from Romans that called to her in moments of despair. The words, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him," had become a mantra, an echo within her heart, challenging her grief with its promise. One chilly autumn evening, Lydia found herself in the quiet sanctuary of the church, the stained glass windows reflecting the setting sun, filling the room with a warm, ethereal light. As she traced the familiar lines of the verse, a thought crossed her mind. Perhaps God's good was not always what she envisioned. Maybe it was about growth, about finding strength in adversity, about connecting with others through shared pain. As Lydia contemplated this newfound perspective, she felt a glimmer of understanding kindle within her. It was a small light, a fragile beacon in the maze of her grief, but it was a start. This journey she had embarked on was not just about finding answers, it was about transformation and growth. It was about embracing her pain and using it to forge a new path, a path where faith and sorrow could coexist. Holding on to that thought, Lydia walked back home under the starlit sky, her heart heavy with loss, but also with a newfound promise. She knew the journey ahead was long, but with her children's love, Daniel's memory, and God's words guiding her, Lydia believed she could traverse the path. As she held the verse close to her heart that night, she found herself not just reciting it, but beginning to embrace its promise. The weeks rolled into months, the chill of winter softening into the bloom of spring. Lydia found herself slowly adjusting to her new reality, each day a test of her resilience and faith. The void left by Daniel was ever present, yet Lydia learned to lean into her grief, finding strength in her vulnerability. In the heart of this transformation, her children, Emily and Sam, provided a constant source of joy and comfort. Their smiles, the innocent questions about the world around them, and their unfaltering love for their mother were reminders of the beauty life still held. One spring afternoon, while walking Emily and Sam back from school, they passed by a dilapidated community center. Once a hub for the town's activities, it now stood forlorn, a forgotten relic. An idea sprouted in Lydia's mind as she observed the abandoned structure. Lydia had been yearning for a way to channel her pain and newfound understanding into something meaningful. She had felt the immense comfort brought by Pastor John and a few close friends during her struggle. What if she could extend that comfort to others navigating the same labyrinth of loss? In the following days, Lydia discussed her idea with Pastor John. She shared her vision of a support group for widows, a safe space where shared pain could be transformed into collective healing. Pastor John, deeply moved by Lydia's strength and determination, gave her his full support. News of Lydia's plan spread through Meadowgrove, touching the hearts of many who had observed her journey of faith and loss. The community rallied around her, their collective effort breathing new life into the forsaken community center. As Lydia watched the transformation of the building, she couldn't help but see a reflection of her journey. The crumbling walls were fortified, much like how her faith was being rebuilt. The dusty windows were cleaned, letting in warm sunlight, akin to her newfound perspective finding its way into her heart. The first meeting was filled with apprehension and an air of quiet anticipation. Lydia, standing before a group of women bound by a common thread of loss, shared her story, her struggles with faith, and the solace she found in Romans 8:28. The room filled with resonant silence, each woman lost in their thoughts, their hearts touched by Lydia's honesty. As weeks passed, the group grew both in numbers and in spirit. Stories were shared, tears were shed, and amidst it all, a sense of camaraderie and understanding took root. The once forgotten community center buzzed with newfound life. its walls bearing witness to a shared journey of healing and growth. In the midst of this transformation, Lydia found herself growing closer to her faith. Every meeting, every shared story, was a testament to the verse from Romans. God was indeed working through their shared pain, transforming it into a source of strength and unity. As spring unfolded into summer, Lydia found her life blossoming in unanticipated ways. The seeds of transformation she had planted were beginning to bloom, offering a balm to her sorrow and a purpose to her journey. Amid the symphony of shared healing, Lydia discovered that her faith, though tested, had emerged stronger, just as the promise of Romans 8:28 had suggested. And in this newfound purpose, she found a way to keep her promise to Daniel, nurturing their children's faith and creating a loving memory of their father. As the pages of the calendar turned, the Widows' Support Group became an inseparable part of Meadowgrove. Lydia watched in quiet amazement as her small idea unfurled into a powerful force of compassion, unity, and transformation. The transformation wasn't just in the lives of the women in the group, but also in the town itself. The once overlooked community center now served as a beacon of hope and strength. Its worn brick walls and newly painted doors stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Inside, each meeting was a sanctuary of empathy and understanding, the air resonating with stories of sorrow, strength, and renewed faith. Lydia's children, Emily and Sam, too felt the ripples of this change. Emily began helping Lydia with the meetings, setting up chairs, and welcoming the women with her heartwarming smile. Sam, though young, took pride in his mother's work. Their home was filled with a newfound sense of purpose and joy, the shadow of loss slowly receding. In this period of growth and healing, Lydia experienced the true meaning of Romans 8:28. As she worked tirelessly to make the support group a source of comfort for others, she found her own wounds healing. Every shared story, every tear wiped away, was a testament to the verse, that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him. In the midst of the bustling activity, there was an unexpected knock on the door one sunny afternoon. It was Martha, an elderly woman from the outskirts of Meadowgrove. With eyes that held years of untold stories, she had been observing Lydia's journey from afar. Martha, too, was a widow. Her grief was an old one, weathered by time yet still very much alive. Martha's entry into the group brought a deeper layer of wisdom and resilience. Her tales of enduring love and loss, her struggle with faith, and her eventual peace resonated with each woman. Lydia and Martha quickly formed a special bond, their shared experience bridging the gap of years between them. Under Martha's guidance, Lydia found her faith deepening. Martha's interpretations of the Bible, her understanding of God's intricate plan, helped Lydia view her life's events with a newfound perspective. The verse from Romans, the one that had anchored Lydia during her darkest times, took on an even profounder meaning. Lydia's life was slowly reconstructing itself around the absence of Daniel, like a tree growing around a void yet still standing strong. She was realizing that while his physical presence was missing, his spirit, his love, was still very much part of her world. It was reflected in her children's laughter, in the support group's success, and in her strengthening faith. As summer approached its end, Lydia stood at the threshold of the rejuvenated community center, gazing at the setting sun. The journey was far from over, but as she reflected on the past few months, she felt a sense of deep contentment. The verse from Romans was no longer just a comforting phrase. It was a living reality in her life. It was a promise that had brought her through the storm and was guiding her towards new horizons. Lydia now understood that her faith, her love for Daniel, and her dedication to their children were the forces that had turned her struggle into a journey of transformation. Autumn swept over Meadowgrove, the landscape painting itself in hues of amber and crimson. As the leaves fell and seasons changed, the Widows' Support Group continued to flourish under Lydia's unwavering commitment and faith. Emily, now fully involved with the group, was growing into a compassionate young woman, her mother's strength mirrored in her actions. Young Sam, following in his sister's footsteps, was coming to understand the significance of their mother's work. He had taken it upon himself to welcome the women each week with a cheerful greeting and a plate of freshly baked cookies. One crisp autumn day, a woman named Rachel walked into the community center. Rachel was a newcomer to Meadowgrove, having moved there after the loss of her husband. She was still caught in the rawness of her grief, her eyes mirroring the pain Lydia had once known so well. Rachel's arrival brought back Lydia's memories of her own early days of loss. She felt a profound connection to Rachel and resolved to help her navigate through her loss as Pastor John and the community had helped her. Lydia's heart ached for Rachel, her raw grief reminding her of her own journey. She remembered the overwhelming grief, the struggle to maintain faith, and the quest for healing. Guiding Rachel, Lydia revisited these stages, each memory reinforcing the role of Romans 8:28 in her life. As Lydia comforted Rachel, she found her faith deepening, the verse once again revealing its layers to her. The support group became a lifeline for Rachel, just as it had been for Lydia and many others. Each shared story, each moment of silence spent in understanding, helped Rachel find her footing in the rough terrain of her loss. Lydia could see the pain in Rachel's eyes slowly receding, replaced with a spark of hope and faith. As the days shortened and the nights grew colder, Lydia found herself looking back at the past year. She marveled at how her life had been reshaped, how she had found strength and purpose in the midst of her deepest sorrow. The community center, now a sanctuary for many, stood as a testament to the power of faith, love, and unity. One evening, Lydia sat down with Emily and Sam, their home warm against the autumn chill. They lit a candle for Daniel, as they did every year on the anniversary of his passing. This year, however, the moment was not just about loss. It was also about celebrating Daniel's life, honoring his memory through their actions, and recognizing the strength they had found in their faith. The verse from Romans, a constant companion on this journey, resonated in Lydia's heart as she looked at her children. Their faces, glowing in the candlelight, were a testament to the promise that God indeed worked for the good of those who loved Him. Despite the struggle and pain, they had found strength, purpose, and a deepened faith. As the three of them sat together, they felt Daniel's presence, his love a warm cloak around them. As Lydia tucked her children into bed that night, she gazed out of the window. The autumn night was quiet, the stars sparkling in the vast canvas of the sky. She reflected on her journey, on the winding path she had walked since losing Daniel. Her heart was filled with gratitude, for her journey had taught her that even amidst profound loss and struggle, life could bloom again under the nurturing sunlight of faith, just as Romans 8:28 promised. The first snowflakes of winter gently caressed Meadowgrove, dusting the rooftops with a shimmering layer of white. Despite the chilly weather, warmth emanated from the community center. Lydia, with Emily and Sam by her side, prepared for their special Christmas gathering. Inside the community center, Lydia had arranged for a large, beautifully adorned Christmas tree. It stood tall and proud, twinkling lights dancing around ornaments that each woman in the group had brought to represent their journey. The tree was not just a symbol of the season, but a testament to their shared experiences and the power of unity. At the gathering, Lydia introduced a new tradition. Each woman was invited to share a story of grace they had experienced in their journey of loss. The room was filled with an emotional symphony of tales, stories of despair turned into hope, of strength found in vulnerability, and of faith deepened through trial. When it was Lydia's turn, she spoke of her initial despair, her struggle to hold on to her faith. She talked about the verse from Romans, which had become a beacon of hope in her darkest hours. Her story, raw and heartfelt, struck a chord with everyone present. Lydia's faith had not only pulled her through but had become the driving force behind the support group. Rachel, inspired by Lydia's speech, shared her own experience. She spoke of her recent pain, her struggle with loss, and how the group had been her safe haven. Listening to Rachel, Lydia saw a reflection of her own journey. This realization brought forth a new layer of understanding. She was not just the helper but also the helped, learning and growing through others' experiences. The evening was filled with tears and laughter, sorrow and hope. But most importantly, it was filled with a profound sense of unity. Every woman in the room felt connected by their shared experiences, and their individual journeys of grief had interwoven to form a strong tapestry of resilience and faith. Emily and Sam, young as they were, observed the evening's proceedings with a sense of awe. Through the stories shared, they learned about the strength of faith, the power of unity, and the importance of compassion. In their hearts, they felt an unspoken promise to carry forward their mother's mission. As the evening wound down, Lydia looked around the room. She saw women who had arrived as strangers, united by loss, now leaving as friends, their bonds strengthened by shared experiences and faith. The sight filled her with a sense of accomplishment and purpose. Later that night, under the glowing Christmas tree, Lydia found a quiet moment of solitude. As she looked at the ornaments, each representing a journey of grief, faith, and healing, she reflected on Romans 8:28. The verse had not only transformed her life but had also given hope and purpose to many others. In the peaceful silence, Lydia thanked God for his guidance, for turning her sorrow into a vessel of comfort for others. Through her struggle, Lydia had found her purpose, and in serving others, she had drawn closer to her faith. As she gazed at the twinkling tree, Lydia understood that grace often worked in unexpected ways, turning even the deepest pain into a source of strength and renewal. As winter thawed and spring blossomed over Meadowgrove, change was in the air. Emily, who had been deeply inspired by her mother's work, was preparing to leave for college to study counseling. She aimed to use her education to support people going through the grief and loss she had once experienced. Lydia couldn't have been more proud. She knew Emily's journey was a testament to Romans 8:28, God's plan working for those who loved him. Around the same time, Sam showed a growing interest in the local church. Influenced by Pastor John and Lydia's faith, Sam found himself called to serve. He started assisting Pastor John with Sunday school, becoming a favorite among the younger children. His joyous laughter and energy brought a renewed sense of vitality to the church. Lydia watched her children come into their own with a sense of satisfaction. Their growth and dedication to helping others were signs that her efforts were more than just about her healing. Her struggles and faith had inspired a ripple effect, influencing her children and extending to the community. Meanwhile, the Widows Support Group continued to thrive, with Rachel gradually taking on a larger role. Rachel, once consumed by her grief, was now helping others navigate through their sorrow. Lydia was delighted to see the transformation in Rachel, mirroring her own journey. One sun-drenched afternoon, Lydia found herself back at Daniel's graveside. It was a quiet day, the air humming with the chorus of spring. As Lydia sat there, a soft breeze rustling the newly bloomed flowers, she realized her visits to Daniel's grave had changed. The pangs of loss were now accompanied by a feeling of peace and gratitude. Daniel's death, while painful, had set her on a path that brought hope and healing to many. Lydia leaned back, looking up at the sky. Clouds drifted lazily against the backdrop of a brilliant blue, and she could almost hear Daniel's soft laughter carried in the wind. She closed her eyes, taking in the warmth of the sun, the scent of blooming flowers, and the tranquility that wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. Lydia whispered a silent prayer, thanking God for the journey, the strength, and the purpose she had found. As she opened her eyes, a butterfly, brilliant and beautiful, fluttered by and landed gently on Daniel's headstone. Lydia watched it, a smile gracing her lips. It felt like a sign, a small assurance from Daniel that he was at peace, and so should she be. She stood up, leaving behind a fresh bouquet of flowers. As Lydia walked away, her heart was lighter, her spirit renewed. The verse from Romans echoed in her mind, reaffirming the power of faith and love. Lydia was no longer the woman she was when Daniel died. She was stronger, wiser, and more attuned to her faith. The woman who walked away from the grave that day was not just a grieving widow, but a beacon of hope for many. She had taken her loss and pain, channeled it through her faith, and created a haven of support and comfort for others. And in the process, she had found her purpose, and her children had found their calling. It was indeed true, as Romans 8:28 stated, "In all things God works for the good of those who love him." As time etched its marks on Meadowgrove, Lydia saw how her small seeds of faith had grown into a strong, sturdy tree, providing shelter and comfort to those in need. The support group continued to expand, becoming a cornerstone of the community. Women who had once arrived full of sorrow now stood stronger, each testament of faith adding another branch to this tree of resilience. Emily had completed her counseling degree and returned to Meadowgrove to join her mother in managing the group. Her youthful enthusiasm coupled with her professional knowledge brought a fresh perspective, helping the group cater to the varying needs of the grieving widows better. Meanwhile, Sam had grown into a young man of faith and dedication. His early interest in the church had blossomed into a full-fledged commitment. Under Pastor John's mentorship, Sam was now an associate pastor, serving the Meadowgrove community with the same spirit of love and faith his mother had instilled in him. One sunny afternoon, Lydia sat in her familiar rocking chair on the porch. She looked at the picturesque view of Meadowgrove, her heart filled with warmth. The sight of Emily and Sam, playing with the children of the widows from her group, brought an overwhelming sense of peace and fulfillment. Lydia's quiet resilience and unwavering faith had sown the seeds of compassion and service in her children, and they were now reaping the beautiful harvest. Lydia picked up her well-worn Bible from the table next to her. As she opened it to Romans 8:28, the words seemed to leap off the page, illuminating her heart with their truth. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. As Lydia reflected on her journey, she saw the profound truth in those words. Her path of sorrow and loss, so entwined with her faith, had led her to a purpose larger than herself. It had brought healing and hope to others and deepened the faith of her children. It had indeed been a long, arduous journey, but every step was worth the destination. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows and bathing Meadowgrove in hues of gold, Lydia closed her eyes, lifting a silent prayer of gratitude. She thanked God for His guidance, His wisdom, and His grace that had carried her through her darkest times. She thanked Him for giving her loss a purpose and her sorrow a resolution. When she finally opened her eyes, her gaze settled on the tree-lined horizon. She was reminded of the seasons she had weathered, the storms she had braved. Yet, through it all, one thing had remained constant: her faith. Just like the sturdy trees that stood tall, her faith had rooted her, allowing her to grow and flourish amidst life's trials. In the tranquil silence, Lydia realized she was no longer just a grieving widow. She was a pillar of strength, a beacon of faith, and a symbol of hope for many. Her journey of sorrow had become a testament of faith, a story of God's divine plan. Romans 8:28, once a verse of comfort, was now a mantra for her life, a beautiful reminder that in all things, God indeed works for the good of those who love Him. Dear listeners, as we reach the end of today's episode, we leave you with a profound sense of the strength of faith and the power of Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. We hope Lydia's story has resonated with you and reminded you that even in our deepest trials, God is working. He transforms our pain into purpose, our loss into love. Join us again on Divine Interventions, as we continue to explore the mysterious and miraculous ways faith impacts our lives. Until then, keep faith in your hearts and God in your thoughts. Goodbye and God bless.